The crack of bone cut through the first-class cabin like a rifle shot. 8-year-old Caden Williams didn't even have time to flinch. 1 second, he was reaching for his game console. The next, William Brooks's fist had already come down, full force, deliberate, without a single word of warning, and the boy's arms snapped under the blow. Caden's scream ripped through every passenger on that plane, raw and animal and devastating. Brooks slowly pulled back his fist, straightened his jacket cuff, and turned back to his laptop screen. No remorse, no hesitation, like he had simply swatted something that had bothered him long enough. A child, in first class, his bone broken. And the flight? It would never reach Los Angeles. Before we go any further, if this story already has your blood boiling, hit that subscribe button right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. Monica Williams had been planning this trip for 4 months. 4 months of overtime shifts at the hospital. 4 months of telling Caden, "Soon, baby, soon," every time he pressed his little face against her arm and asked if they were really going. 4 months of budgeting, of cutting corners on groceries, of skipping her own lunch breaks so she could squirrel away just a little bit more for what she had decided, without apology, would be a first-class experience for her and her son. Because Caden deserved first class. That was not a thought Monica entertained lightly or with any sense of guilt. She had raised that boy alone since he was 3 years old. She had held him through nightmares, read every school report with pride trembling in her hands, cheered at every single Little League game, even when she was running on 3 hours of sleep and her feet were screaming inside her nursing shoes. Caden James Williams, 8 years old, gap-toothed, obsessed with dinosaurs and space and anything that moved fast. He deserved to sit up front for once. He deserved the warm towel and the real silverware and the seat that turned into a bed. He deserved to feel like the world had room for him in the good seats. So Monica had booked 2 seats in first class on a direct flight from John F. Kennedy Airport in New York City to Los Angeles International, departing on a Thursday morning in late October. She had picked Thursday specifically because Caden had a 4-day weekend from school, and she had arranged her own schedule at the hospital with military precision so that not a single moment would be wasted. She had even let Caden pick out a new backpack for the trip, a navy blue one with a small iron-on patch of a Stegosaurus that he had picked himself and then made her iron on 3 times until it was perfectly straight. The morning of the flight, Caden woke up before his alarm. Monica heard him in the kitchen at 5:15 in the morning, and when she shuffled out in her robe, he was already dressed, his backpack on, eating cereal with the focused intensity of a soldier preparing for deployment. "Baby, our flight doesn't leave until 9, she said. He looked up at her with those big brown eyes of his and said, dead serious, "Mom, we need to be early." She laughed so hard she had to sit down. At the airport, Caden held her hand all the way through security, pressed close to her side, but with his neck craned up at everything: the departures board, the moving walkways, the windows overlooking the tarmac where the plane sat enormous and patient in the gray morning light. When they reached the first-class lounge and the attendant at the door smiled and waved them through, Caden squeezed Monica's hand so hard her knuckles popped. "Mom," he whispered, "this is the fancy part." "Yes, it is," she whispered back. They found seats by the window, and Caden pressed his forehead against the glass and watched the ground crews moving around the planes below with the reverence of someone watching a religious procession. Monica ordered a coffee, closed her eyes for exactly 3 minutes, and felt, for the first time in longer than she could honestly remember, something that felt like peace. She should have known peace was a borrowing. She should have known it always came with interest. William Brooks arrived at the gate 11 minutes before boarding. Monica noticed him the way you notice a change in air pressure. Not because he did anything dramatic, not because he announced himself, but because the room shifted slightly when he walked in. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal blazer over a white dress shirt that was open at the collar, expensive watch catching the overhead light. He carried a leather carry-on bag and moved through the lounge with the practiced ease of a man who had spent his entire adult life in rooms where other people stepped aside for him. He didn't look at Monica. He didn't look at Caden. He looked at his phone, then at the departures board, then at his phone again, And then he sat down in one of the chairs across the lounge and crossed his ankle over his knee and exhaled through his nose with the particular irritation of a man who considered waiting to be a personal insult. Monica registered him the way you register weather. Noted, filed, returned to her coffee. Boarding was called at 8:47. First class boarded first, and Monica let Caden carry his own backpack up the jetway, watching him walk ahead of her with his narrow shoulders squared and his chin up. And she felt that particular kind of love that has no vocabulary, the kind that sits in your sternum and radiates outward until your whole chest aches with it. Their seats were 2A and 2B, window and middle on the left side of the cabin. The seats were wide and upholstered in a soft gray fabric, and when the flight attendant, a woman named Diane with a warm smile and a Louisiana accent, welcomed them and offered Caden a pair of headphones, he accepted them with a solemn, "Thank you, ma'am," that made Diane press her hand to her chest. "Oh, he is precious," Diane said to Monica, low and genuine. "I know," Monica said. "Don't tell him that. His head's already a normal size, and I'd like to keep it that way." Diane laughed. Caden, who had heard every word, said, without looking up from examining his headphones, "I heard that." The cabin filled. Business travelers, a couple who looked like they were heading to a honeymoon, an older woman with a small dog and a carrier under the seat, a man in a baseball cap who fell asleep before the door even closed, and William Brooks, who settled into seat 3C, directly across the aisle from Caden, with the precise, deliberate movements of a man arranging himself in a space he had already decided belonged to him. He put his bag in the overhead bin. He adjusted the air vent above his seat. He opened his tray table, looked at it, closed it again. He put his phone on the armrest, then moved it to his lap. He was, Monica would think later, already coiled, already at some private threshold, like something in him had been accumulating pressure for a very long time, and the question was never if it would release, only when and onto whom. The plane pushed back from the gate at 9:04. Caden watched the airport recede through the window, with his nose so close to the glass it was fogging. Monica put in her own earbuds and pulled up a podcast she had been meaning to listen to for weeks. The engines climbed, the ground fell away. Caden turned from the window to Monica with an expression of pure electric joy and said, "Mom, we're flying." "We are," she said. "We're actually flying. That is the general function of an airplane, yes." He turned back to the window, satisfied, and Monica allowed herself to settle deeper into her seat and breathe. The sky outside was the specific blue of early morning, pale at the horizon, deepening to something vivid overhead. And for a long, quiet stretch of time, everything was exactly as it should be. The first 40 minutes of the flight were unremarkable. Caden watched a documentary about deep-sea creatures on the seatback screen, periodically elbowing Monica to point out something that impressed him. Monica listened to her podcast, occasionally reaching over to fix his blanket when it slid off, occasionally glancing across the aisle with the automatic awareness of a mother whose child is in a closed space with strangers. William Brooks spent those 40 minutes working on his laptop. He typed hard and fast, the way people type when they're angry at their keyboard, jaw set, eyes narrowed. Once his phone buzzed and he looked at it, and something in his face went tighter, a muscle in his jaw jumping, and he put the phone face down on his tray table with more force than was necessary. Monica clocked it, put it away. The flight attendants came through with drinks and a warm snack, and Caden, having temporarily exhausted his interest in anglerfish, accepted a cup of apple juice with great seriousness and asked Diane if she knew how deep the Mariana Trench was. Diane said she did not. Caden told her, in considerable detail. Diane was either genuinely fascinated or was an extraordinarily committed professional. Monica strongly suspected the latter, loved her for it either way. The problem started at the 1 hour and 12-minute mark. Monica would later be able to give that time with precision because she had been looking at her phone when it happened, checking a message from her sister. Caden reached past her, across his own seat, to pull his game console out of the backpack tucked in the seat pocket in front of him. It was a small, enthusiastic reach, the kind a child makes when they have just remembered something they are excited about. And in the process, his elbow swung out to the right and caught the edge of William Brooks's open tray table, which was extended across the aisle. It was a graze, less than a graze. The tray table rocked. Brooks's water glass shifted an inch. The water did not spill. "I'm sorry," Caden said immediately, turning toward the man with the automatic politeness Monica had spent years drilling into him. "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to." What happened next would replay in Monica's mind for months. She looked up from her phone and saw William Brooks turn his head toward her son. She saw the set of his face, not startled, not annoyed in the passing way you're annoyed when someone bumps into you, but set with something harder, something that had been waiting for a place to go. She saw him look at Caden the way you look at something that has confirmed exactly what you already believed about it. "Watch what you're doing," Brooks said, low, controlled, but with an edge that made the word land like something thrown. Caden blinked. "I said I was sorry. I don't care what you said. I said watch what you're doing." Monica was already pulling out her earbuds. "Excuse me," she said evenly, angling across Caden so her voice carried clearly. He apologized. It was an accident. Brooks looked at Monica the same way he had looked at Caden, that same slow, settling look. "Your kid needs to learn how to sit still." "My kid is 8 years old," Monica said. Her voice was steady. She had a voice for situations like this. Not raised, not trembling, just absolutely immovable. And he apologized. "We're done here." Brooks turned back to his screen. Monica put a hand on Caden's arm, squeezing lightly. Caden looked up at her with those wide eyes that ask the question children ask when they encounter adult ugliness for the first time, a question that has no clean answer. And she gave him the look that said, "I see it. I've got you. You're okay." She thought it was over. She told herself it was over. She turned back to her phone and pressed play on her podcast and told herself that men like William Brooks existed in every space, on every flight, in every room. And the trick was to refuse them more than the exact amount of energy they were owed. But it was not over. For the next 20 minutes, the tension across the aisle was a living thing. Monica could feel Brooks's awareness of them, the way you feel a heat source without looking at it. Caden, to his credit, was making visible effort to be still. He had his game console now and was playing something that required pressing buttons, his movements careful and contained, his elbows tucked. He was doing everything right. He was doing everything exactly right. And Monica noticed this with a quiet fury that she kept below the surface because her son was watching her, and she would not let him see her afraid. At the 1 hour, 35-minute mark, Caden's game made a sound, not a loud sound, a small, tinny electronic fanfare, the sound of a level being completed or a bonus being collected. The headphone jack on his console had, without anyone noticing, come slightly loose. The sound played through the speaker for approximately 1.5 seconds. William Brooks's head turned so fast it was almost mechanical. "Seriously?" he said. "I'm sorry," Caden said, grabbing the headphone jack and pressing it back in, his voice smaller now. "It came out. I'm sorry." "You have been a disturbance this entire flight." Monica's hand came down on Caden's arm before she was consciously aware of moving. "Sir," she said, and now there was something else in her voice, something that had moved past measured. "That sound lasted 1 second. My son has been perfectly well behaved on this flight. If you have a problem, please speak to the flight attendant. I have a problem with your kid disrupting a first-class cabin. Then call the flight attendant. Maybe you should have thought about that before you brought a child up here." The words landed in the cabin with the force of something dropped from a height. Several passengers nearby went very still in the particular way of people who have just understood that they are witnesses to something. The woman with the small dog looked up sharply. The man in the baseball cap, who had been asleep, was not asleep anymore. Monica's heart was hitting her ribs hard and even. She was aware of Caden beside her, his small body absolutely rigid, his game console forgotten in his hands. She was aware that he was listening to every word. She was aware that this moment would live in him. "My son has every right to be in this cabin," she said. "Same as you." Brooks made a sound. It was not quite a laugh. It was something that belonged in the same family as contempt. He turned back to his laptop. Monica turned to Caden. He was looking at the seat back in front of him. His jaw was tight in the way that 8-year-old jaws go tight when the owner of that jaw is working very hard not to cry. "Hey," Monica said, very quietly, just for him. "Look at me." He looked at her. His eyes were bright. "You are doing everything right," she said. "You hear me? You are doing everything exactly right. Don't let him shrink you." Caden gave a small, shaky nod. He pressed play on his game. His thumbs moved. Monica watched the color return to his knuckles. She flagged Diane when the flight attendant came through, explained quietly what had happened. Diane's expression shifted through several degrees of professional concern. She said she would speak to the passenger. She moved toward seat 3C with the diplomatic grace of someone about to attempt diffusing something unstable. Monica couldn't hear what Diane said to Brooks. She could see his profile, the way he listened with a certain impatient stillness, the way he responded in clipped sentences with his eyes returning to his screen before Diane had finished speaking. She could see Diane nod once, twice, and then return down the aisle. "He says he understands," Diane said, low and careful. "I've noted the exchange. If anything else happens, please let me know immediately." Monica said she would. She thanked Diane. She settled back into her seat. 20 minutes passed. 30. The tension across the aisle did not dissolve so much as it compressed, packed tighter and tighter into the space between the two rows. Monica's podcast played in her ears, but she heard none of it. She was tuned to a different frequency, the frequency of the man in 3C, the frequency of her son beside her, the frequency of the space between them that felt charged and unstable and wrong. At the 2-hour and 3-minute mark, Caden shifted in his seat. He had been sitting in the same position for a long time, his small body compensating, adjusting the way children do when they are trying very hard to take up less space than they need. He moved his leg. The heel of his sneaker scuffed the carpet. A sound barely worth describing, barely worth registering. William Brooks turned his head, and then he moved. It happened faster than Monica's mind could fully process in real time. She would reconstruct it later, in the cold clarity of aftermath. She would reconstruct the way Brooks stood halfway out of his seat, the way his right arm drew back, the way there was a half second in which the world seemed to hold its breath. Then his fist came down on Caden's arm. The sound of the impact was not what she expected. It was not the movie sound of a punch, not the flat slap of palm on skin. It was a crack, dense and structural, the sound of something that was meant to be solid being forced to give. And in the same instant, Caden screamed. Not a child's startled cry, not the sound of fear, the sound of pain, real, shattering, immediate pain. A sound that Monica had never heard come out of her son's mouth and that she would hear in her dreams for months and years after. She was standing before she knew she was standing. "What did you do? What did you do to my son?" Caden was clutching his arm, doubled forward, his face a color she had never seen on him. And he was screaming, and she was trying to get to him, and the world had gone to pieces around her. And William Brooks was sitting back in his seat, face closed, as if he had simply closed a window he found annoying. The cabin erupted. Every voice, every head, every hand. The man in the baseball cap was on his feet. The woman with the dog was shouting something. 2 passengers from the rows behind were leaning forward, voices raised. And through it all, Caden was crying. Not the crying of embarrassment or frustration, but the crying of a body in serious distress. And Monica was holding him, shielding him, one hand cradling his arm as gently as she could, while the other reached blindly for the call button above her head and pressed it over and over and over. Diane appeared in what felt like seconds. One look at Caden's arm, the angle of it, the way he held it, the way he would not let anyone near it, and her face changed entirely. She turned and went for the front of the cabin at a pace that was not quite running, but was the professional equivalent of it. "Ma'am," she said to Monica when she came back, kneeling in the aisle, voice pitched low and steady against the noise. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened." Monica told her. Every word. Her voice was shaking, but her account was exact and factual, and she did not raise her voice or alter a single detail, and she held Caden's good hand the entire time, feeling him grip her fingers with a strength that broke her heart open. Diane looked across the aisle at William Brooks. He was looking at his laptop screen. He might have been reviewing a spreadsheet. He might have been reading the news. He was not looking at the child whose bone he had just broken. "Sir," Diane said. He did not look up. "Sir, I need to speak with you right now." He looked up then. His expression was the particular expression of a man who considers being addressed by a flight attendant a mild inconvenience. "I handled a disturbance," he said. "The child has been out of control for this entire flight." The passenger in 1A, a woman Monica had barely registered before, somewhere in her 50s, silver-haired, in a blazer, turned all the way around in her seat. "Are you serious right now?" she said. Her voice carried clearly over the noise. "He's a child. He's 8 years old. You broke his arm." "I disciplined a disruptive—" "You hit a child," the man in the baseball cap said flatly. He was standing in the aisle, arms at his sides. "On a plane. You hit an 8-year-old child." Brooks looked at him with that same settling look. "I suggest you sit down. I suggest you think very carefully about the next words out of your mouth." More voices. The cabin was fully awake now, fully engaged, the low electric charge of collective anger finding its shape and its direction. Monica heard none of it clearly. She heard only Caden. Caden asking if his arm was broken. Caden asking if it was going to be okay. Caden asking in a voice so small it felt like it was coming from somewhere very far away, "Mom, why did he do that?" And Monica Williams, who had an answer for almost everything her son had ever asked her, who had navigated 8 years of hard questions with patience and honesty and love. Monica Williams held her son's face in her hands and said, "I don't know, baby." Because she didn't. Because there was no answer that would satisfy the question he was actually asking, which was not, why did that man do that? It was, why does the world sometimes do this to us? And there was no answer for that. Not one she could give him in a first-class seat at 30,000 feet while his arm lay broken in her lap. Not one she could give him at all without telling him a truth that no 8-year-old should have to carry. Diane was on the phone with the cockpit. Monica could see her at the front of the cabin, speaking in the low, rapid cadence of someone conveying urgency with professional restraint. She watched Diane nod twice, listen, nod again, and hang up. The intercom crackled. The pilot's voice came through, measured and calm, in the way that pilots are trained to sound when things are not measured or calm. He said that the crew was aware of a situation in the first-class cabin. He said that out of an abundance of caution, the flight would be diverting to the nearest available airport. He asked all passengers to remain seated with their seatbelts fastened. 15 minutes. The plane would land in 15 minutes. In seat 2B, Caden Williams stopped crying. Not because it stopped hurting, but because he had gone somewhere else, somewhere behind his eyes, somewhere quiet and unreachable that Monica recognized and feared and loved him for all at once. He was still holding her hand. He held it all the way down. The plane touched down at 2:17 in the afternoon at a regional airport in Kansas City, and by the time the wheels stopped rolling, the first-class cabin had already divided itself into 2 distinct camps. Those who were furious at William Brooks and William Brooks. He sat in 3C with his laptop closed now, his hands folded on top of it, his expression carrying the particular blankness of a man who had decided that whatever was happening around him was beneath his engagement. He had not looked at Caden since Diane had come back from the cockpit. He had not looked at Monica. He had not looked at any of the passengers who were looking at him with the specific heat of people who want to say more than they currently feel safe saying. Monica was not looking at him either. She was looking at her son. Caden's arm had swollen visibly in the 35 minutes since the impact. Monica could see the distortion through his sleeve, a wrongness in the line of his forearm that made her stomach drop every time she looked at it. She had immobilized it as best she could, folding her cardigan into a makeshift support and holding it in place with her hands, and Caden was leaning into her side with the particular exhausted stillness of a child who has moved past the acute phase of pain into the dull, heavy country that comes after. He had stopped crying 20 minutes ago. That almost scared her more. "Does it still hurt?" she asked him, quiet. "Yeah," he said. Just that. One word, flat and honest. "Okay, we're almost on the ground. They're going to help you." He nodded against her shoulder. Then, after a moment, he said, "Mom, are we going to L.A.?" Monica pressed her lips together. "Not today, baby." He was quiet for a beat, then, "Okay." That single word, the resignation in it, the absence of protest, the way he just folded it into himself and accepted it, landed in Monica's chest like a stone dropped into water, and the ripples spread out and did not stop. The seatbelt sign clicked off at 2:19. Before most passengers had even reached for their bags, Diane appeared at the front of the cabin and addressed the first-class section with a clear, practiced steadiness that Monica would later think deserved a commendation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to ask everyone in first class to remain seated for the time being. Law enforcement will be boarding the aircraft shortly. This is standard procedure given the events that occurred during our flight. I appreciate your cooperation and your patience." The words fell into the cabin cleanly. Most passengers stayed put. The woman in 1A, silver-haired, blazer, who had spoken up during the confrontation. Monica had learned her name was Patricia Hendricks. She had introduced herself 40 minutes earlier by leaning over the seat and saying, "I saw everything, and I will say so to whoever needs to hear it." Patricia Hendricks reached into her bag, produced a small notebook, and began writing in it. Date, time, flight number. Monica noticed and felt a small, fierce gratitude that was almost painful in its intensity. The man in the baseball cap, Marcus, he'd told her his name was Marcus. He worked in logistics. He was heading to L.A. for a job interview, was still standing in the aisle. Diane had asked him twice to sit down. He had sat down and then stood back up. He was not doing anything aggressive or disruptive. He was simply refusing to put his body in a position that suggested this was normal. "Sir," Diane said to him gently, "please." Marcus looked at her. Then he looked at the top of Caden's head, visible over the seat back. Then he sat down. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped and his jaw working like he was chewing on words he hadn't decided whether to swallow or spit out. William Brooks had not moved. 2:24. The boarding door opened. 2 uniformed Kansas City airport police officers came through first, followed by a third officer in plainclothes, a detective, Monica would later learn, named Ray Okafor, who had been called directly by the airline's ground operations and had driven to the gate before the plane had finished taxiing. Behind them came 2 paramedics with a bag and a portable splint kit. Monica saw the paramedics, and something in her unlocked. Not dramatically, not with tears. She'd been holding herself at a certain pitch of controlled intensity for so long that the release was almost imperceptible. Just a loosening, just the transfer of weight from her own shoulders to someone else's, partial and temporary, but real. "That's my son," she said as they came down the aisle. "His name is Caden. He's 8. I think his forearm is broken." The lead paramedic, a woman in her 30s with short natural hair and steady hands, crouched into the aisle beside Caden's seat and introduced herself as nurse practitioner Sandra Obi. She spoke directly to Caden first, not to Monica, and Monica noticed this and was grateful for it. "Hey, Caden, my name's Sandra. I'm here to look at your arm, okay? I'm going to be really careful. Can you tell me when it hurts the most?" Caden considered this with unexpected seriousness. "When I breathe in," he said. Sandra nodded. "Okay, I'm going to move as little as possible. You're doing great." While Sandra worked, Detective Okafor positioned himself at the head of the aisle. He was in his mid-40s, heavy-set, with an expression that gave very little away, except that it was paying attention to everything. He spoke first to Diane, low and brief. Then he walked down the aisle to seat 3C. "Mr. Brooks," he said. Brooks looked up. His expression did not change. "Detective, I'm going to need you to come with me, sir. I'm sure you understand I'd like to speak with my attorney first. You're welcome to do that once we've exited the aircraft. Right now, I'm asking you to stand up and come with me." There was a pause. It was not a long pause, but it was long enough for every person in that cabin to hold their breath. And then William Brooks closed his laptop, slid it into his leather bag with the unhurried movements of a man who still believed the world would wait for him, and stood up. He was taller standing. Monica had not fully registered that before. He filled the aisle the way large men do, and as he turned to follow the detective, his eyes passed over Monica and Caden for the first time since the impact. Not with guilt, not with remorse, with the brief, evaluative look of a man checking a column of numbers. Caden was looking at Sandra's hands, working gently on his arm. He did not look up. Brooks walked past them and was gone. The cabin let out its breath. 2:31. Sandra had confirmed what Monica already knew, a likely fracture of the ulna, possibly the radius as well, requiring imaging before they could know the full extent. She had the arm supported and immobilized, and Caden's pain level, on a scale Sandra had asked him to rate himself, had dropped from a 9 to a 6, which was not good, but was better than the before. "Can you walk, buddy?" Sandra asked him. Caden said yes. He said it with a certainty that made Monica's throat tighten, because she knew that certainty. She had built it into him year by year, the understanding that you say yes when you can, and you ask for help when you can't, and you always know the difference. She had built it in without knowing she was building toward a moment like this one. She helped him stand. He stood, his good arm looped through hers, his injured arm held close to his body in Sandra's portable splint, and he walked up the aisle of the first-class cabin with his chin up and his jaw set and his navy blue Stegosaurus backpack — Monica had grabbed it automatically, a mother's reflex — hanging from her shoulder. As they passed Patricia Hendricks in 1A, the silver-haired woman reached out and touched Monica's arm. Monica stopped. "I have your name and seat number in my notebook," Patricia said. Her voice was low and clear and without any of the performative sympathy that Monica had braced herself for. "I have everyone in this cabin who saw it. I'm a retired family court judge. I know exactly what I watched happen, and I know exactly what I'll say." Monica looked at her for a moment. "Thank you," she said. It came out smaller than she intended. Patricia nodded once, firm like a gavel. They exited the plane at 2:36. The gate area at Kansas City was not designed for the kind of attention that was about to find it. A standard regional terminal, moderate foot traffic, a cluster of plastic chairs and a newsstand and a coffee kiosk, whose attendant was going to describe this afternoon on the phone to his mother for the next 3 days. William Brooks was already off to the side with Detective Okafor and one of the uniformed officers, his phone pressed to his ear, his posture radiating the specific kind of calm that belongs to people who believe that the correct phone call can make almost anything manageable. Monica clocked him as she came through the gate door, registered that he was already working his network, and then deliberately moved her eyes away because Caden was watching her face for cues, and she would not give him the sight of his mother looking at that man with anything other than dismissal. A second detective was waiting at the gate, female, younger, introduced herself as Detective Carla Mwangi. She asked Monica if she was willing to give a statement. Monica said yes. Detective Mwangi said she could do it here or at a room the airline had arranged down the corridor. Monica said the room. They sat at a small table. Monica, Caden, Sandra, who stayed with Caden while Monica spoke, and Detective Mwangi with a recorder and a legal pad. Monica gave her account in the same way she had given it to Diane on the plane. Exact, sequential, without embellishment or omission. She described the first incident with the tray table, the exchange, Diane's intervention, the second incident with the headphone jack, Brooks's escalation, the moment before the strike itself. Detective Mwangi wrote everything down. She asked several clarifying questions, all of them precise and non-leading. She asked Caden one question directly. "Can you tell me what happened to your arm?" And Caden, sitting with his splinted arm in his lap, said, "The man hit me, really hard. I didn't do anything." Mwangi wrote it down. She did not react outwardly. Monica watched her write the words and thought, My 8-year-old just gave a cleaner statement than most adults could. 2:58. The airline's regional operations manager, a man named Greg Pullman, knocked on the door and asked if he could come in. He was in his 50s, tie slightly crooked, looking like a man who had received a phone call an hour ago that had fundamentally altered the trajectory of his Thursday. He apologized to Monica, formally and at some length. Monica listened to all of it and then said, "My son needs to get to a hospital." Pullman said the airline had arranged transportation. He said the airline would cover all medical expenses. He said, and here his voice dropped slightly, taking on the quality of a man reciting something he had been told to say, that the airline took incidents of this nature with the utmost seriousness and was fully cooperating with law enforcement. Monica said, "What happens to him now? To Brooks?" Pullman cleared his throat. That's in the hands of law enforcement at this point. I'm asking what the airline is going to do." A pause. "Mr. Brooks is a frequent flyer with premier status on our—" "I did not ask about his status," Monica said. Her voice was absolutely flat. "I asked what the airline is going to do about a man who broke my child's arm on your plane." Pullman's collar moved. He said the airline would be reviewing Mr. Brooks's account privileges. Monica looked at him for a long moment, the way you look at something that has confirmed a suspicion you wish had been wrong. And then she turned to Detective Mwangi and said, "I'd like to get my son to the hospital now." They were in the airline-arranged vehicle at 3:12. Caden fell asleep on Monica's shoulder 3 minutes after they left the airport, his splinted arm resting across his stomach, his breathing deep and slow in the way of someone whose body has decided that rest is the only reasonable response to the day it has had. Monica kept her hand on his back, feeling each breath rise and fall, and stared out the window and made a series of mental lists. Insurance cards, hospital intake, who to call, her sister, her son's pediatrician, the hospital, a lawyer. That last one she added to the top of the list and started twice. She did not cry in the car. She had cried exactly once in the past 3 hours, in the single minute when Diane had been talking to the cockpit and Caden had been in the worst of his pain, and Monica had bent her head over his and let 3 seconds of it come out before she packed it back down. That was all she'd allowed herself. She would not allow more. Not yet. Later, much later, after the hospital, after the calls, after Caden was settled and medicated and asleep somewhere safe, she would let it come. She knew it was coming. She knew exactly how it would feel. She had felt it before, in different rooms, at different ages, in different shapes. The particular anguish of being a black mother in America, watching the world make its position known to your child. But not yet. Right now, there was only the next thing, and the next, and the next. They reached the hospital at 3:41. The emergency room intake moved faster than Monica had expected. She would realize later that the airline had called ahead, and that the presence of an 8-year-old with a broken arm and a police case number had a way of accelerating certain processes. Caden was taken to imaging within 25 minutes of arrival. Monica sat in the waiting room with his backpack in her lap and his Stegosaurus patch under her thumb, and rubbed it back and forth, without being aware she was doing it. Her phone had been buzzing since they landed. She had been ignoring it. She looked at it now. 14 missed calls. Her sister Renee, 6 times. Her mother, twice. 3 numbers she didn't recognize. And 1 text from a number she definitely did not recognize, which read, "I'm a journalist with the Associated Press. We're aware of an incident on a flight from JFK to LAX involving a child. Are you the mother?" Monica stared at this for a moment. She turned her phone face down on her knee. 409. The radiologist's results came back. Radial fracture, clean break, no complications to the growth plate. The attending physician, a Dr. Nathaniel Park, who looked approximately 26 years old, but spoke with the assurance of someone who had been setting fractures for decades, explained the treatment plan in terms he carefully calibrated for both Monica and Caden simultaneously. Cast, 6 weeks, full recovery expected. He said the words "full recovery," and Monica felt the tension in her back drop approximately 1 degree, and that 1 degree was everything. Caden looked at the images of his own arm on the tablet Dr. Park showed him with the focused interest of a child who has temporarily suspended his emotional processing in favor of his intellectual curiosity. "Is that the radius?" he asked, pointing. Dr. Park looked at him. "It is. You know your bones?" "I know some of them," Caden said. "I want to be a paleontologist." Dr. Park smiled. "Then you're already ahead of most people." Monica pressed her hand over her mouth for exactly 1 second and then moved it away. 4:37. Caden was getting his cast fitted. Purple, his choice, without hesitation, when Monica's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Detective Mwangi. Monica stepped just outside the door and took it. "Ms. Williams, I wanted to update you on where things stand." "Please," Monica said. "Mr. Brooks has been formally arrested on 1 count of assault causing bodily harm to a minor. He was booked at 3:49 this afternoon. He has posted bail." A pause. "He was released at 4:22. Monica said nothing for a moment. Then, "He's already out." "He retained counsel very quickly, yes, a firm out of New York. I want to be honest with you, that's not uncommon in cases involving individuals with certain resources. What is also not uncommon is that the evidence we have is strong. We have multiple eyewitnesses. We have at least 3 independent video recordings from passengers' phones that captured portions of the incident. We have medical documentation. We have his statements to the flight attendant." "Someone filmed it," Monica said. It wasn't a question. 3 people, Mwangi said. One of them filmed most of the exchange preceding the strike. We're in the process of collecting those as evidence. Monica leaned against the wall outside her son's hospital room. Through the door, she could hear Caden asking the casting technician whether purple was the strongest color option or just his personal preference. She heard the technician laugh. She heard her son's voice, clear, still curious, still himself, and she gripped that sound with everything she had. "What happens next?" she asked. "The DA's office will review for charges. Given the circumstances, the age of the victim, the nature of the injury, the public setting, the witness and video evidence, I expect they'll move forward. But Ms. Williams," Mwangi's voice shifted slightly, "I want you to be prepared. These cases, they tend to move into a larger space than just the courtroom. There's already media inquiries coming into our office. I don't know what your preference is on that front, but you should know it's coming." "I know," Monica said. "I've already had the AP in my messages." "I'd recommend speaking to an attorney before you speak to anyone else." "That's already on my list," Monica said. She hung up. She stood in the hallway for another 30 seconds, eyes on the middle distance, thumbs pressed together. She ran through the arithmetic of the day: a broken bone, an arrest, a bail posting, 3 videos she hadn't known existed, a retired judge with a notebook, a journalist who had found her phone number in less than 4 hours. Then she opened the door and went back to her son. Caden had chosen purple for the cast and was now inspecting the finished product with considerable satisfaction. He held it up for Monica when she came in, rotating his arm carefully, examining it from multiple angles. "Look," he said. "I see," she said. She sat down in the chair beside him and looked at the purple cast and the small brown wrist protruding from the top of it, and the bitten fingernails, and the callus on his thumb from holding his game console. She looked at all of it for a moment before she looked back up at his face. "Mom," Caden said, more quietly. The technician had left the room. Dr. Park was at the nurse's station. It was just the 2 of them, the way it always came back to just the 2 of them. "Yeah, baby." "Was it because we're black?" The question dropped into the room without preamble, without build-up, delivered in the same matter-of-fact tone he used to ask factual questions about deep-sea creatures and dinosaur fossils. And Monica understood, with a clarity that hurt, that he had been holding this question since the cabin, that he had been carrying it through the landing, and the detectives, and the ambulance, and the hospital, turning it over quietly inside himself, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the room to go quiet enough that the answer could be heard properly. She looked at her son for a long moment. "I think," she said carefully, "that when someone carries a lot of hate inside them, they look for a reason to put it somewhere. And sometimes they choose who to put it on based on what someone looks like." "Yeah, baby, I think that was part of it." Caden nodded slowly. He was looking at his cast. "That's wrong," he said. "It's very wrong. He should know better." He absolutely should. Caden was quiet for another moment. Then he looked up at her, and in his face she saw something that was not the devastation she had feared, not the shuddering in she had dreaded, but something harder and more durable than either. An 8-year-old coming to the end of a long thought and arriving somewhere that would hold. "Are we going to make sure he gets in trouble?" Caden asked. Monica reached out and laid her hand on top of his good one. "Yes," she said, "we are absolutely going to make sure of that." Caden looked at his purple cast one more time. Then he said, "Can I have a snack? I haven't eaten since the airport." Monica laughed. It came out louder than she intended, startled out of her by the sheer, magnificent, relentless normalcy of her child. She laughed until her eyes stung, and Caden watched her with mild concern. And then she pulled herself together and went to find him something to eat. Outside the hospital window, the afternoon was shifting toward evening, and somewhere across the city, William Brooks was making phone calls of his own. And in the morning, everything was going to be different. Monica got Caden a bag of pretzels and a Gatorade from the hospital vending machine at 5:17, and by 5:45, he was asleep in the hospital bed with his purple cast resting on a pillow and the Gatorade half finished on the tray beside him. He fell asleep the way children fall asleep after catastrophic days, completely, immediately, like a light switched off. And Monica sat in the chair beside him and watched his chest rise and fall, and finally let herself make the calls she had been deferring since the plane. Renee picked up before the first ring had finished. "Monica, what happened? I've been calling you for 2 hours. I've been seeing things online. People are saying—" "It's true," Monica said. Quiet, not wanting to wake Caden. "All of it. He's okay. His arm is broken, but he's okay. He's sleeping right now." A pause that contained several kinds of silence at once. Then Renee said, "Tell me everything." Monica told her, all of it, the same way she'd told the detective, precise and sequential, her voice barely above a whisper in the dim hospital room. She heard her sister's breath change at certain points, quicken, then go silent, then come out in a long, slow exhale that had a word embedded in it that Monica chose not to repeat. When she finished, Renee said, "I'm driving up." "You don't have to." "Monica, I am driving up." Monica did not argue. She knew the tone. She said, "Drive safe." Her mother was next. That call lasted 11 minutes and was the hardest one because her mother was 71 years old and had spent 71 years in this country and understood immediately, with the particular intuition of a woman who had survived long enough to recognize every shape the same thing could take, exactly what had happened to her grandson and exactly why. She did not cry. She asked 3 questions. Is Caden's injury serious? Did they arrest the man? Do you have a lawyer? Monica answered yes, yes, and not yet. Her mother said, "Not yet needs to be tonight." "I know, Mama. Tonight, Monica, not tomorrow." "I know." She called her hospital colleague and friend David Park, no relation to the ER doctor, who was a medical malpractice attorney with contacts in personal injury and civil rights law. She had his personal cell because they'd worked together on a patient advocacy case 3 years ago, and he had told her then, unprompted, "If you ever need a referral for anything, I mean anything, you call me directly." She had filed that away in the part of her mind where she kept things she hoped never to use. David answered on the second ring. She explained what had happened. He was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then he said, "I'm going to give you a name. Teresa Albright. She's civil rights, she's done airline litigation, and she is, Monica, she is exactly who you want. I'm going to call her right now before I call you back, so she's expecting you." "Thank you," Monica said. "Don't thank me. Call Teresa." 6:03. She put her phone down and looked at Caden's sleeping face and thought about the AP journalist who had her number and the 3 videos that passengers had filmed and the retired judge with the notebook and the fact that William Brooks was somewhere in this city right now, bailed out, lawyered up, phone to his ear, and that all of it was moving, gathering, building towards something that had not yet reached its full shape. She thought about what Detective Mwangi had said. It tends to move into a larger space than just the courtroom. She was beginning to understand what that meant. 6:19. Her phone buzzed. David Park. Teresa Albright was expecting her call. He gave her the number. Monica wrote it on the back of a hospital receipt because her phone's notes app felt insufficient for this particular number. She called it immediately. Teresa Albright had a voice that was warm and unhurried and gave you the immediate impression of someone who had heard everything and could not be rattled by anything. She said, "Ms. Williams, I've been briefed. Before we go further, I want you to know that you don't need to make any decisions tonight, but I do need to ask you a few things." "Go ahead," Monica said. "Have you spoken to any media?" "No." "Have you posted anything on social media about the incident?" "No." "Good. Keep it that way for now. Has anyone from the airline contacted you beyond the operations manager at the gate?" "Not yet. They will, probably tomorrow morning with a formal written apology and something that sounds like an offer. Do not sign anything. Do not verbally agree to anything. Call me first." "Understood." "Now," Teresa's voice shifted slightly, took on a different weight. "I've already seen 2 of the videos. They're on Twitter. They've been on Twitter since approximately 4:30 this afternoon, and as of an hour ago, one of them had 4.2 million views." Monica was very still. "I didn't know that." "I know you didn't. Ms. Williams, I need you to understand. By tomorrow morning, this story is going to be everywhere. I've already had 3 journalists contact my office asking if I represent you. I don't yet, but I'd like to, if you'll have me." The room felt different after that phone call, smaller somehow, and also much larger than it had been that morning when the only thing it contained was the anticipation of a trip that was supposed to be about warm towels and real silverware, and a little boy pressing his forehead against a window to watch the ground fall away. 6:51. Monica was looking at her phone when she found the first video herself. Someone had filmed from the row behind Brooks. The angle was partial. You could see the back of his shoulder and the side of Caden's seat, and you could see the arm come up and come down, and you could hear the sound of the impact, and you could hear what came after. It was 17 seconds long. She watched it once. Her hands were completely steady. She put her phone face down on the tray table and sat with her eyes closed for 30 seconds. Then she looked at Caden. He was still sleeping. His mouth was slightly open. His purple cast looked enormous on his small arm. She picked up her phone and watched the number at the bottom of the video climb in real time. 4.8 million. 4.9. She watched it tick upward and understood that her life and Caden's life had already passed through a door that would not open from the other side. 7:14. Renee arrived. She came through the hospital room door with her coat still on and her keys in her hand, and she looked at Caden sleeping, and then she looked at Monica, and she crossed the room and put her arms around her sister without saying a single word. And Monica, who had been holding everything at the correct pitch of controlled intensity for 9 hours, let out one long, shuddering breath into Renee's shoulder and then pulled herself back together. "Okay," Renee said, stepping back and looking at her properly. "Okay, what do you need right now?" "Coffee," Monica said, "and someone to be angry with me." Renee pulled off her coat. "I can do both." They sat together on either side of Caden's bed while he slept, and Renee listened to the full account one more time, and this time, Monica let more of the texture of it come through. Not just the facts, but the feeling of it, the way the cabin had felt, the specific quality of Brooks's look when he turned toward Caden that first time, the way Caden had said, "I didn't do anything" to Detective Mwangi, with such total certainty, the way he had fallen asleep holding her hand in the car, with his chest rising and falling in that slow, deep rhythm. Renee listened to all of it with the particular listening that only comes from people who have known you your entire life and love you past the point of reason. When Monica finished, Renee said, "He's going to pay for this." "Yes," Monica said, "he is. Not just in court." "No, not just in court." They looked at each other over Caden's sleeping form, and between them passed the specific understanding of 2 black women who had grown up in the same house and learned the same lessons, and knew without having to say it aloud that justice was a thing you had to build with your own hands, stone by stone, and that the building had already begun. 7:58. Monica's phone lit up with a notification from a news app. She looked at it. The headline read, "Video goes viral. White passenger punches black child in first class. Flight diverted." She put the phone down without reading the article. Renee had already opened her own phone. She was reading. Her face changed as she read. Not dramatically, but in the small, precise ways that faces change when what they're reading confirms something they already knew but had been hoping was wrong. "It says his name," Renee said. "They've published his name and his job. He's a VP at a real estate development company. They have his LinkedIn photo." Monica said nothing. "Comments are—" Renee stopped. "Monica, this is going to be bigger than you're ready for." "I know. I mean bigger than that." "Renee," Monica looked at her. "I know." 8:22. Caden woke up. He woke up the same way he had fallen asleep. Suddenly, completely, his eyes opening and finding Monica's face immediately the way they always had, the way they had when he was a newborn and she had leaned over his bassinet and he had tracked her face before he could track anything else. "Mom," he said. Then he saw Renee. "Aunt Renee?" "Hey, baby," Renee leaned forward. "How's the arm?" Caden looked at his cast like he was remembering. "It hurts, but not as much." He looked at Monica. "Did you call Grandma?" "I did." "Is she mad?" "She's worried. There's a difference." Caden considered this. "She sounded mad?" "She loves you. Sometimes those sound the same." He almost smiled. Almost. Then the smile didn't quite finish, and he looked down at the cast again, and Monica watched the day come back to him in pieces. She could see it moving through his face like weather, the recollection arriving in stages, the way recollections do when you've slept in between them and woken up hoping they might have rearranged themselves into something better. "Mom," he said, "I looked it up on the plane, before it happened, on my tablet. I was looking up which dinosaurs were alive during the Cretaceous period." He paused. "I just want you to know I wasn't being loud. I was just reading." Monica's chest folded inward. "Baby, I know that. I just wanted you to know." "I know. I was there the whole time. You didn't do anything wrong." He nodded. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then, "Is he in jail?" Monica and Renee exchanged a look over his head. Monica said, "He was arrested. He got out on bail, which means he paid money to be let out while they decide what to do next." Caden frowned. "He got out?" "For now, but there are charges against him. That means he has to go back. There's going to be a process, and we are going to be part of that process, and we're going to make sure it goes the right way." What if it doesn't go the right way? It was a 9-year-old's question, asked with a 30-year-old's precision, and Monica felt the weight of it settle on her the way only certain questions can. The questions the children ask when they have already begun to suspect that the world does not automatically correct itself, that the people in charge of correcting it sometimes need to be pushed. "Then we push harder," Monica said simply. Caden looked at her. Something moved through his face. "Okay," he said. And then, because he was still 8 years old, "I'm really hungry." 9:03. The night attending physician, Dr. Chung, came through with updated notes and confirmed that Caden could be discharged that evening, provided Monica had a place to stay in Kansas City. She could not responsibly put a fresh fracture patient on a plane tonight. And Monica said yes, the airline had arranged a hotel, and Dr. Chung gave her a detailed printout of care instructions and a prescription for a mild pediatric pain reliever, and shook her hand with both of hers in the way of a doctor who has something to say that the printout doesn't cover. "He's a strong kid," Dr. Chung said quietly at the door, "and he's lucky to have you with him." Monica said, "Thank you," and meant it. But she was already thinking about the hotel, and the morning, and the attorney, and the thing Teresa Albright had said. By tomorrow morning, this story is going to be everywhere. She did not have to wait until morning. 9:27. The hotel was a mid-range business property, 4 minutes from the hospital, booked in the airline's name, 2 adjoining rooms, and the front desk clerk who checked them in looked at Caden's purple cast and then at Monica, with a recognition that made Monica understand the story had already reached the hotel lobby. The clerk said nothing. To her credit, she said nothing, but the recognition was there, unmistakable, in the slight extra gentleness with which she handed over the key cards. In the room, Renee set Caden up with his tablet and a room service order of mac and cheese and a glass of chocolate milk, and then came back to Monica's adjoining room and closed the door between them to a crack. Twitter, Renee said, is completely on fire. I know. His employer has been tagged about 800,000 times. Monica said nothing. 3 congresspeople have tweeted about it. One of them is calling for a federal investigation into... Renee, Monica sat on the edge of the bed. I know all of this is happening. I know it's real. I need 30 seconds. Renee went quiet. Monica sat with her hands in her lap for exactly 30 seconds. Then she picked up her phone. She had 47 missed calls. She had 212 text messages from numbers she did not recognize. She had a voicemail from the VP of Communications at the airline. Personal cell number, formal voice, requesting a call at her earliest convenience. She had a text from Teresa Albright, sent at 8:54, which read, "Call me when you can. Developments." She called Teresa. Teresa answered immediately. "Ms. Williams, I'll be quick because I imagine your night has been something. The DA's office has fast-tracked the charging review. I have a contact there, and she confirms they're looking at felony assault of a minor. That's a significant charge. It carries," a brief pause, "up to 8 years in Missouri, depending on how they classify the circumstances. But here's what I also need to tell you." "Tell me," Monica said. "Brooks's attorney reached out to my office at 9 o'clock tonight. They want to discuss a settlement, a private settlement, civil side, before this goes further." The temperature in the room changed. Monica felt it the way you feel a draft under a door. Not dramatic, just suddenly, undeniably present. "How much?" she said. "They haven't named a figure yet. They're calling it a preliminary inquiry. But the fact that they're moving this fast, this early, on a Thursday night, that tells you something about how worried they are." "They're worried because of the videos," Monica said. "They're worried because of the videos and the witnesses and the medical report and the fact that their client punched an 8-year-old child in the arm hard enough to fracture the bone, and 30 people watched it happen in broad light in first class." Teresa's voice was measured, but something under it had an edge. "I want to be very clear with you about one thing, Ms. Williams. You have real leverage here. Criminal charges are proceeding independent of anything we do. What we decide together is whether you want to pursue this civilly, how publicly, and what you want the outcome to look like. Not just for Caden financially, but for what this case means beyond your family." Monica was quiet for a moment. "What does it mean beyond my family?" "That depends on what you decide to do with it." Teresa paused. "But I'll tell you this. There are people watching this story right now, tonight, who have been waiting a very long time for a case where everything is visible, where the evidence is undeniable, where there is video, witnesses, documentation, and a child. You don't have to be a symbol. You have the right to settle quietly and protect your son's privacy. But if you decide you want to do more than that, I can help you do more than that." Monica looked at the crack in the door where a thin line of light came through from Caden's room. She could hear the television, some animated thing he'd found, some bright, uncomplicated world of sound and color. She listened to his laugh come through, small, genuine, the laugh of a child who can still access delight on the worst day of his life. "I'll call you tomorrow morning," Monica said. 8 o'clock. "I'll be there," Teresa said. 10:14. Monica sat in the chair by the window of the hotel room and opened her phone, and for the first time since it had all begun, she searched for the videos herself. Not the partial one she'd found earlier, all of them. Teresa had mentioned 3. Monica had been mentioned by the detective. She searched and found them and watched each one in sequence. The first was the partial one, 17 seconds, the angle from behind Brooks's row. The second was longer, 43 seconds, filmed from across the aisle, 2 rows back. It caught the headphone jack moment, Brooks's turn, his voice. You couldn't hear the words clearly, but you could hear the tone, clipped and contemptuous. And then Monica's voice responding, steady, and then a gap of about 8 seconds, and then the strike. You could see it clearly in this one. The way his arm moved, the angle of the impact, the way Caden's whole body recoiled. And then the sound. The sound that 40 million people would hear by Friday afternoon. Monica watched it once. She watched it twice. On the third viewing, she stopped the video at the moment just before impact and held the frame there. Brooks's arm drawn back. Her son's profile turned slightly away, unaware, reaching for a game console, existing in the last second before the world changed his body. She pressed play and let it finish. The third video was filmed from a seat farther back, through the gap between seats, and it caught the aftermath. Monica on her feet, Caden crying, the cabin erupting. It caught a woman's voice saying something that had become, by this point, the most quoted line in 36 hours of frantic online commentary. "He's 8 years old. You broke his arm." That was Patricia Hendricks. Monica recognized the voice. She closed the phone. She sat in the dark and let herself feel what she had been managing all day. Not the grief part, not the fear part, but the anger part, the clean, clarifying, fully justified anger. She sat with it and let it fill all the space it needed, and she did not apologize for it, and she did not compress it, and she did not aim it anywhere it shouldn't go. She just held it, the way you hold something that belongs to you. After a while, Renee pushed the door open and came in and sat on the edge of the bed across from her. "What are you thinking?" Renee asked. Monica looked up. "I'm thinking he picked the wrong child," she said. "He picked the wrong child, and he picked the wrong mother, and he picked the wrong flight. And there were 3 cameras running and a retired judge with a notebook." Renee looked at her for a moment. And tomorrow I'm going to call an attorney at 8 o'clock, Monica said, "and I'm going to make sure that every single piece of that matters." Renee nodded slowly. "Okay. I'm also going to need better coffee than whatever that vending machine had. I'll find you coffee." Renee, Monica looked at her sister in the dim room, at the face that had been beside her face her entire life. "Thank you for driving." Renee said, "Don't." Her voice was rough. "Don't thank me for that. That's not... You don't thank family for that." Monica nodded. She turned back to the window. Outside, Kansas City was doing whatever Kansas City did on a Thursday night, unbothered and ordinary, and entirely unaware that in a room in a mid-range hotel, 4 minutes from a hospital, a woman was sitting in the dark, deciding exactly how much she was willing to ask the world to reckon with what it had done to her child. 10:49. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number she didn't know, and this time she almost didn't open it. But something made her tap the notification. It read, "My name is Marcus Webb. You don't know me, but I was in the seat behind you on the plane today. The baseball cap. I have a 7-year-old daughter. I want you to know that I gave my full statement to the detective, and I filmed everything from the moment it started. I will testify, whatever you need. I just needed you to know that." Monica read it 3 times. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she typed back, "Thank you, Marcus. I will be in touch." She set the phone face down. In the next room, Caden's television had gone quiet. She pushed open the door and looked in. He was asleep again, one arm tucked under his chin, the purple cast catching the faint light from the hallway, his navy blue backpack sitting on the chair beside the bed, exactly where she had put it, the Stegosaurus patch facing out. She crossed the room and pulled his blanket up to his shoulder and stood there for a moment in the particular silence of a mother watching her child sleep, when sleep is the best thing he could possibly be doing, the most protected he could possibly be, the place where the day could not follow. Then she went back to her room, and she lay down on top of the covers fully dressed, and she stared at the ceiling, and she thought about tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after it, and the shape of what was coming, which was large and complicated and would require everything she had, and which she was, without question, fully prepared to meet. Monica was awake at 5:47 Friday morning before her alarm, before Renee stirred in the next bed, before the city outside had fully committed to daylight. She lay still for exactly 1 minute, running through the architecture of the day ahead, and then she got up and washed her face and made a cup of bad hotel coffee from the single-serve machine on the dresser and sat down with her phone. The numbers had moved overnight in the way that numbers move when the internet decides something matters. The 43-second video, the clearest one, the one that caught the strike at full angle, had crossed 68 million views. Not 68,000, not 6.8 million. 68 million. In less than 15 hours. Monica looked at the number for a long time without any particular expression on her face, and then she opened her contacts and found Teresa Albright's number, and confirmed to herself that she would be calling it at exactly 8 o'clock. 6:12. She checked the news apps. She had been the lead story on 4 national outlets since approximately 2 in the morning. CNN, The New York Times, The Washington Post, ABC News. Each of them had the video. Each of them had William Brooks's name, his photo, his title. Senior Vice President, Acquisitions, Hargrove Capital Development, New York City. Each of them had a version of the same basic facts, though the quality of the reporting varied in ways that Teresa would later help her assess carefully. What none of them had yet was a statement from Monica. That absence was, she was beginning to understand, itself a kind of power. Every outlet that was running the story was running it without her voice, which meant the story was incomplete, which meant the demand for her voice was building toward a pressure that would eventually need to be directed somewhere deliberate. 6:28, she checked one more thing. She went to the website of Hargrove Capital Development. It was still up. William Brooks's name was still on the leadership page, third from the left in the executive team photo, his expression in the headshot projecting the particular confidence of a man who has never seriously questioned his place in any room. The caption still read, William T. Brooks, SVP Acquisitions, 15 years of industry leadership. She took a screenshot, filed it. 6:51. Caden woke up asking for breakfast and for his charger, in that order, and Monica felt the day reset itself around his voice, the way it always did, the way his presence had always reorganized whatever room he was in toward something more essential and more real. His arm hurt, he said, a 5 out of 10, which was progress. He wanted to video call his grandmother. He wanted scrambled eggs. He wanted to know if the hotel had a pool. Baby, Monica said, we are not here for the pool. I know, he said. I was just asking. Renee produced scrambled eggs from the hotel breakfast service at 7:15 and set Caden up with his grandmother on video call, and Monica listened to her mother's voice through the tablet speaker. Warm and steady, with a current of fury carefully held below the surface, talking to her grandson about his cast color and whether purple was his favorite or just the best option available. And she turned away so Caden wouldn't see her face while she listened. 7:44. Her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again. She let it go again. A text followed. Ms. Williams, this is James Pryor from the Washington Post. We would deeply appreciate the opportunity to speak with you at your earliest convenience. We are committed to telling this story with full accuracy and with your perspective at the center. She read it, put the phone down, picked it up again, put it down. 7:59. She dialed Teresa Albright. Teresa answered at the half ring. Good morning. I've been up since 4. So have I, Monica said. 68 million views. 71 as of 6 minutes ago, Teresa said, and climbing. Monica, may I call you Monica? Yes. Brooks's company put out a statement at 11:30 last night. I'm going to read it to you. A brief pause, the sound of papers. It says, Hargrove Capital Development is aware of an incident involving one of our employees that occurred yesterday during a personal flight. We do not condone violence of any kind and take this matter with the utmost seriousness. Mr. Brooks has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the ongoing legal process. We extend our sincerest sympathies to the child and family involved. Monica said nothing. Administrative leave, Teresa repeated, with a particular dry precision. Not terminated, not resigned. Administrative leave. Which means they're waiting to see how this lands before they decide what to do with him, Monica said. Exactly right. Which tells us that whatever their internal legal team is saying, they haven't fully committed to cutting him loose. That's important to know, Teresa paused. Now, Books' attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch, and I want to be honest with you, he is very good. He has gotten people out of situations that looked significantly worse than this one on paper. Reached out again at 7 this morning, this time with a number. Monica's grip on the phone tightened slightly. What number? $300,000. Civil settlement. Full release of liability. Confidentiality clause. No admission of wrongdoing from Brooks. The silence stretched for several seconds. No, Monica said. Teresa said, I want to make sure you've heard the full shape of what you're turning down, because rejecting this means committing to a process that will be long, public, and genuinely difficult for you and for Caden. No, Monica said again. Same tone, same absolute certainty. He wants me to take money and sign something that says this didn't mean anything and that nobody gets to know. No. Okay, Teresa said, and Monica heard something in that single syllable that might have been satisfaction. Then here's what we do. 8:41. Monica knocked on the adjoining door, and Renee opened it immediately. She had clearly been listening for the knock, which was why Monica loved her. Monica sat on the edge of Renee's bed and told her about the offer and about turning it down. And Renee listened and nodded, and when Monica finished, Renee said, Good. It's going to get harder, Monica said. It's already hard. Might as well make it count. Caden appeared in the doorway between the rooms in his socks, holding his tablet, purple cast resting against his chest. Are we going home today? He asked. Monica looked at him. Not yet, baby. We have some things to do here first. What things? Grown-up things. He made the face he made when that answer wasn't going to be sufficient. Can I know what kind of grown-up things? Monica looked at him for a moment. She thought about Teresa's question from the night before. Do you want to do more than settle quietly? She thought about what she had said to Renee. He picked the wrong child. She thought about 68 million people who had watched 17 seconds of her son's worst moment and felt enough to share it with someone else. The kind where we make sure the person who hurt you can't just walk away, she said. That kind. Caden considered this. Okay, he said. Can I watch TV while you do it? 9:07. They checked out of the hotel and moved to a conference space that the airline had arranged, a private room at a downtown Kansas City office that the airline's regional counsel used for sensitive meetings. And the setting was clinical and deliberate, in a way that told Monica exactly how seriously the airline was now taking the optics of what had happened on their plane. 3 airline representatives were present. The regional counsel, a woman named Sandra Holt, who shook Monica's hand with both of hers, a senior VP of customer experience who had flown in from the airline's headquarters that morning and who kept touching his collar, and Greg Pullman, the operations manager from the gate, looking like he had not slept. Teresa Albright was there too, in person, having driven down from her Kansas City office. She was in her late 50s, natural silver locks, a dark blazer, reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she greeted Monica with the specific warmth of a person who is genuinely on your side and wants you to feel that without performance. Sandra Holt opened the meeting with a formal, written apology on airline letterhead. She read it aloud. It used the phrase, deeply regret, twice, and unacceptable breach of passenger safety once, and failed to protect once. And it was, Monica thought, as close to an adequate apology as a corporation was structurally capable of producing, which was not very close at all, but was something. Teresa let her read it. Then she put both hands flat on the table. Thank you. Now here's what my client needs from your airline, separate from and in addition to any civil proceedings against Mr. Brooks. What followed was 40 minutes of negotiation that Monica sat through with the focused attention she gave difficult shifts at the hospital, tracking every variable, noting every hesitation, filing every qualification for later review. Teresa was methodical and relentless, and never raised her voice once, which Monica recognized as a particular kind of skill, the kind that made the other side increasingly nervous, precisely because they could not read the temperature. At the end of the 40 minutes, the airline had agreed in principle to 5 things. Full coverage of all medical expenses, current and future, related to Caden's injury. A formal policy review of their in-flight incident response procedures. Mandatory retraining for all cabin crew on de-escalation and physical threat response. a commitment to provide a witness statement supporting criminal prosecution, and an acknowledgement in writing that the airline bore partial institutional responsibility for failing to prevent the escalation after the initial complaint. That last one made the SVP touch his collar 3 times in rapid succession. That language, he said carefully, is going to need to go through our legal team before... Your legal team has 48 hours, Teresa said pleasantly. After that, Ms. Williams will be speaking publicly. I imagine your legal team works quickly when they're motivated. 10:53. Monica and Teresa stood in the corridor outside the conference room while Renee sat with Caden in a waiting area down the hall. Caden had his tablet and was, Monica could see from the corridor, deeply engaged in something that involved headphones and what appeared to be a nature documentary. You did well in there, Teresa said. You did well in there, Monica said. I watched. Teresa smiled briefly. Here's what's next. The DA's office has scheduled a press conference for 2 o'clock this afternoon. I have a contact who has confirmed they will be announcing formal charges. Felony assault of a minor, as I told you. There may be additional charges, depending on what the evidence supports. We'll see what they announce. The press conference will restart the news cycle, and your name will be in every headline again by this evening. I know. I want to talk to you about whether you want to make a statement. Not to the press, not yet. But there are a few organizations, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the ACLU, a civil rights coalition I work with, who have reached out overnight expressing interest in the case. If you want support at that level, it changes the profile of this significantly. It also means less control over the narrative. Monica thought about this for a moment. What does Caden's life look like if we go to that level? Complicated, Teresa said honestly. There will be a tension. Some of it will be supportive. Some of it will be intrusive. There will be people who try to make him a symbol before he's finished being a child. She paused. But there will also be something done, really done, properly done, in a way that makes a record about what happened to him. And that record matters beyond your family. Monica was quiet for a moment. Down the hall, she could see Caden's profile, his head bent over his tablet, his purple cast resting on the arm of the chair. She thought about him asking, was it because we're black? She thought about him saying, that's wrong, with the flat certainty of someone naming a fact that the universe should already know. She thought about every mother who had ever sat in a room like this one and been offered the quiet version. Set up the calls, she said, with the organizations. Let's hear what they have to say. 11:38. The first call was with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, a senior staff attorney named Dr. Imani Cole, who had been following the case since 6 that morning and spoke with the precision of someone who had been building arguments in their head for 5 hours. She explained what institutional support would look like, what resources they could bring, what the historical context of the case was in terms of case law around racial bias and assault in public accommodations. Monica listened to everything and asked 3 questions. The first was about Caden's privacy. Dr. Cole said it would be protected as a primary value throughout any involvement. The second was about timeline. Dr. Cole said truthfully that these things moved at the speed of courts, which was not fast, but that the criminal case would move faster and would set important precedent. The third question Monica asked was the one that mattered most. Does it help, she said. Not symbolically, not in theory. Does it actually help? Does doing this at this level make things better for families that come after us? Dr. Cole was quiet for a moment. Ms. Williams, I have been doing this work for 19 years. The cases where nothing changes are the cases where the family takes the settlement and disappears. The cases where something actually moves, where policy changes, where legislation gets attention, where airlines and corporations and courts have to look directly at what they've been allowing, those cases happen because someone said no to quiet. So yes, it helps, but I won't pretend it doesn't cost something too. Monica said, "Thank you for being straight with me. It's the only way I know how to do this," Dr. Cole said. 12:14. Monica went to sit with Caden while Renee and Teresa handled a call with the Civil Rights Coalition. She sat beside him and looked at what he was watching. It was, in fact, a documentary about the Cretaceous period, the paleontology one he'd been talking about on the plane. and she put her arm around him, and he leaned into her without looking up from the screen. After a few minutes, he said, without preamble, "Mom, did you know the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was probably about 6 miles wide?" "I did not know that." "It hit so hard it caused fires all over the whole world." "That's intense." "And then the sky was dark for years, and everything that needed the sun died." He paused. "But then mammals survived, and eventually there was us." Monica looked at the side of his face. "Are you telling me a story about surviving things?" He thought about it. "I'm telling you about the dinosaurs," he said. "But also, maybe, yeah." She pulled him closer and he allowed it, which meant he needed it. And they sat like that for a while with the documentary playing and the corridor outside quiet and the ordinary, extraordinary business of the morning continuing around them. 1:17. Teresa came back with her reading glasses in her hand and an expression that had shifted from measured to something more charged. "Something just happened," she said. Monica looked up. "What?" "Gerald Fitch, Brooks's attorney, just issued a public statement on behalf of his client." Monica waited. "It says," Teresa put her glasses on, looked at her phone, "that William Brooks deeply regrets any distress caused by the events aboard the aircraft. It says that Mr. Brooks was under significant personal stress that day and reacted in a manner that was disproportionate and wrong. It says he takes full responsibility for his actions and intends to cooperate fully with all legal proceedings." Monica stared at her. "He's saying he did it." "He's not denying it. His attorney is putting a narrative into the record. Stress, disproportionate reaction, takes responsibility, before the DA announces charges at 2 o'clock. They're trying to get in front of the story. They're trying to look cooperative before they're forced to be." Monica felt something move through her that was not satisfaction and not anger, but something that partook of both. The particular feeling of watching someone realize they've run out of road. "He's scared," she said. "He should be," Teresa said simply. 1:58, 2 minutes before the DA's press conference. Monica, Renee, Caden, and Teresa were in the conference room with a laptop open, watching the Kansas City DA's live stream. Caden was eating a sandwich. He looked up at the laptop with the mild curiosity of a child who understands that something important is happening, but is not yet clear on all the pieces. "Is that about me?" he asked. "Yes," Monica said. "What are they going to say?" "That the man who hurt you is being charged with a crime." Caden looked at the laptop for a moment. "What does charged mean exactly?" "It means the government is officially saying he did something wrong and he has to answer for it in court." He thought about this. Like, he can't just say it didn't happen? He can try, but we have 3 videos, about 15 witnesses, a retired judge, a logistics worker named Marcus who filmed the whole thing, and a broken bone documented by a hospital. Caden looked at his purple cast. Then he looked at Monica. "That's a lot of evidence," he said. "That's a lot of evidence," she agreed. 2 o'clock. The Kansas City District Attorney, a woman named Patricia Osei, stepped to the podium on the live stream and looked directly into the camera and said that her office was filing formal charges against William T. Brooks, age 44, of New York City. 1 count of felony assault in the first degree of a minor, 1 count of reckless endangerment, and here the room Monica was sitting in went very still. 1 count of a hate crime enhancement, given evidence suggesting the victim was selected on the basis of race. The hate crime charge. Monica had known it was possible. Teresa had told her it was possible. But hearing it spoken aloud, officially, on a government live stream, by a district attorney who then described the evidence, the witness accounts of racial language, the pattern of targeting, the specific nature of the escalation, made it real in a way that possibility had not. Caden looked at Monica. He had heard the words. He was 8 years old, and he was perceptive, and he had heard the words hate crime, and he understood what they meant, because Monica had never lied to him about the words that describe the world. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know, baby. That means they know it was because of us being black. It means they're saying it officially, yes." He looked at the screen for a moment longer. Then he looked down at his sandwich and took a bite and chewed it slowly, and Monica watched him process this the way he processed everything, from the inside, thoroughly, without rushing. After a moment, he said, "Good." Just that. Good. The same word he'd used when she told him they were going to make sure Brooks got in trouble. Delivered in the same quiet, factual, 8-year-old tone. Like someone checking off a box that needed to be checked. Monica pressed her hand over her mouth for exactly 2 seconds. Then she removed it. 2:23. Monica's phone rang with a New York area code she didn't know. She almost let it go. Teresa, who was reading the DA's full statement on her own phone, glanced over and said, "Take it. This is the hour when things start moving." Monica answered. The voice on the other end was a woman. She identified herself as the Chief People Officer at Hargrove Capital Development. Her voice had the careful, modulated quality of someone who had rehearsed the call, but was still nervous about making it. She said the company wanted Monica to know that, effective this morning, William Brooks had been terminated from his position. Not administrative leave, terminated. Effective immediately. The company was issuing a full statement within the hour. Monica said, "Thank you for letting me know. Ms. Williams, we are genuinely sorry. I want you to hear that from a person, not a press release." Monica looked across the room at her son, who had abandoned his sandwich and was back on his dinosaur documentary, headphones in, purple cast resting on the conference table. She thought about this woman on the phone, and what it had taken for the company to arrive at this call, and how much of that arrival had been ethical, and how much had been 68 million views and a DA announcing a hate crime charge on a live stream. She thought about both things being simultaneously true. "I hear you," Monica said. "Make sure the statement reflects it." She hung up. Teresa looked at her. They fired him. Yes. That's a significant development. It changes his financial posture, his leverage, his ability to sustain expensive legal representation. Teresa paused. It also changes the public narrative. The corporation is no longer circling the wagons. They're separating themselves from him. That's important. Monica nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to make a statement." Teresa was very still. "Today?" "Not to a specific outlet. To everyone. I want to write something and put it out myself, directly, so it comes from me and not through someone else's angle." She looked at Teresa. "Can we do that in a way that doesn't compromise the legal case?" Teresa thought for approximately 4 seconds. "Yes, if we draft it carefully and I review it before it goes out, yes. There are things you can say that are factual and human and powerful that don't give Brooks's attorney anything to work with." "Then let's draft it," Monica said. They worked on it for 40 minutes. Monica wrote and Teresa edited and Monica rewrote, and at the end of it, the statement was 4 paragraphs long. It did not describe the incident in legal terms. It did not grandstand. It did not perform. It said that her son was 8 years old and curious and kind and had done nothing wrong. It said that he had been hurt on a plane for existing in a space where someone had decided he did not belong. It said that she was his mother and she would use every resource available to her to make sure that the people and institutions responsible were held accountable. And it ended with one sentence that Monica had written in the first draft and Teresa had not changed at all. "My son asked me why it happened, and I told him the truth. And then he asked me if we were going to make sure the person got in trouble, and I told him yes. I meant it then. I mean it now." 3:47. The statement went out through Teresa's office to every media outlet that had been requesting comment. It went out on the NAACP Legal Defense Fund's platform. It went out on the Civil Rights Coalition's network. And Renee, who had been given explicit permission, posted it on her own social media accounts with no comment, just the text. 4 minutes later, Monica's phone became functionally unusable from the volume of incoming notifications. She put it face down on the conference table and looked at Caden, who had fallen asleep in his chair with his head on his arm and his documentary still playing on the tablet in front of him. The sound turned down to almost nothing, the screen showing a paleontologist brushing dirt off the surface of something ancient and enormous and not yet fully understood. She watched him sleep. His chest rose and fell. His purple cast was a bright, vivid thing in the dim conference room light, like a flag planted in difficult territory. She thought about the morning 4 months ago when he had woken up before his alarm, already dressed, backpack on, ready for a trip she had saved 4 months to give him. She thought about the way he had squeezed her hand when they walked into the first-class lounge. She thought about him saying, "Mom, we're actually flying." They were, she thought, still, in every way that mattered. Outside the conference room, the phones kept ringing. The story kept moving. The world, having seen what it had seen, was in the early stages of deciding what it was going to do with what it knew. And Monica Williams sat in a Kansas City conference room next to her sleeping son and his purple cast and his dinosaur documentary, and she was completely, utterly, and deliberately still. The stillness of a woman who knows that the storm is not over, that the hard part is still ahead, that the courtroom and the cameras and the months of grinding legal process have not yet begun. The stillness of a woman who is not afraid of any of it. Caden slept for 41 minutes in that conference room chair while the world outside rearranged itself around what had happened to him. When he woke up, he asked for water and then asked Monica if they could go home tomorrow. And she said yes, and he said okay, and went back to his documentary without ceremony. And Monica thought that this precise, unremarkable moment of her son asking for water and accepting an answer and moving forward was the most important thing that had happened all day. More important than the DA's press conference, more important than the termination call, more important than the statement going out into the world and setting off every notification on every device in the room. Her son had woken up, asked for water, and kept going. That was everything. That was the whole measure. 4:59. Teresa had a call with Dr. Imani Cole at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, while Monica and Renee sat with Caden and ordered room service to the conference space because none of them had eaten a real meal since Thursday morning. The food arrived at 5:22. Actual food, hot food, the kind that requires a plate, and Caden ate with the focused intensity of a child making up for lost time, his purple cast propped on the table beside him, the Stegosaurus backpack hanging from the back of his chair like a mascot. Renee watched him eat and then looked at Monica and mouthed the words, "He's okay." And Monica nodded once and looked away quickly because she was not going to cry in front of the hotel room service cart. 5:41. Teresa came back. She sat down, folded her hands, and said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you react." Monica put down her fork. "Tell me." Gerald Fitch called again, not with a settlement offer this time, with something different. Teresa paused. "Brooks wants to meet with you, directly. No lawyers in the room, just him and you." The silence in the room had a specific quality. Renee stopped chewing. Caden, sensing something without knowing what, looked up from his plate. Monica said, "Why?" "Fitch says his client needs to say something to you that he can't say through attorneys or press releases or court filings. He says Brooks hasn't slept. He says the man is, his word, unraveling." "Good," Renee said flatly. Monica held up one hand slightly, not silencing Renee, just asking for space. She looked at Teresa. "What's your read?" "My read is that this is either genuine remorse from a man who has watched his entire life collapse in 36 hours, or it's a strategic move to create a sympathetic narrative before sentencing." Teresa's voice was even. "Possibly both. People are rarely only one thing, even people who do terrible things. What does it do to the case if I go?" "Nothing. Anything said in that meeting is not admissible. He can't use it to withdraw charges. Those are the DA's now, not yours. It would not affect our civil proceedings in either direction." Teresa looked at her directly. "It would only affect you. Whatever he says, whatever you feel in that room, that's the only thing at stake." Monica was quiet for a long moment. She looked at Caden, who had gone back to his food but was still listening with the particular half-attention of a child pretending to be less present than he is. "I'll think about it," she said. Teresa nodded. "You have time. Fitch is waiting." 6:18. Monica stepped out into the corridor, alone. She stood with her back against the wall and her arms crossed, and she thought about William Brooks. not with hatred, because she had decided somewhere in the long, sleepless stretch of Thursday night that hatred was too consuming a fuel for the distance she needed to travel, but with a clear, unflinching assessment of what he was and what he had done and what his face had looked like when he turned toward her son. The nothing in his eyes, the practiced contempt, the way he had straightened his jacket cuff afterward. She thought about the statement she had written. She thought about the sentence that Teresa hadn't changed. My son asked me why it happened, and I told him the truth. She thought about all the versions of this story she had never wanted to be in. She thought about all the mothers who had been in some version of this story before her, who had made their choices in rooms smaller than this one, with fewer people in their corner, and no cameras, and no retired judges with notebooks. And she thought about what she owed them, and what she owed Caden, and whether those two things were the same thing or different things. She thought about it for 11 minutes. Then she went back inside. "I'll meet him," she said, "tomorrow morning, 1 hour. Teresa is outside the door, and I walk out the moment I decide to." Teresa looked at her. "Are you sure?" "No," Monica said honestly, "but I'm going." 7:03. They went back to the hotel. Caden had a bath, complained about keeping the cast dry, demanded Monica tell him 2 facts about any extinct animal of her choosing while he got ready for bed. This was a long-standing bedtime ritual between them, one she had started when he was 4, and he was now too old for and refused to relinquish. And Monica told him that the woolly mammoth was still alive as recently as 4,000 years ago, and that the dodo bird was actually reported to have been quite aggressive, not gentle and stupid as people assumed. He considered both facts from his pillow. "The dodo thing changes a lot," he said. "I thought you'd appreciate it." Were people mean to the dodo? People ate the dodo into extinction, yes. That's wrong. Many things are wrong, baby. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom, are you nervous about tomorrow?" She looked at him. "What do you know about tomorrow?" "I heard you tell Aunt Renee you were going to talk to him." A pause. "The man." Monica pulled his blanket up. "I'm not nervous. I know exactly what I'm going to say." "What are you going to say?" She thought about it. "I'm going to say what needs to be said." Caden looked at her for a moment with those old soul eyes of his. Then he said, "Tell him he scared me, okay? Tell him that. I wasn't going to say it, but he really scared me, and I want him to know." Monica felt something shift in her chest so profoundly, she had to hold very still for a moment until it settled. "I will tell him," she said. "I promise." He nodded, closed his eyes, was asleep in 4 minutes. Friday night passed slowly. Monica lay awake and thought and did not think and thought again. And at some point before midnight, she picked up her phone and found Marcus Webb's text. The man in the baseball cap, the one who had filmed everything, the one who had a 7-year-old daughter. And she typed, "Thank you again, Marcus. We are moving forward. Your testimony matters more than you know." He replied within 2 minutes, even at that hour. "I'll be there, whatever it takes. Some things you don't walk away from." She put her phone down and finally slept. Saturday morning, 8:47. The meeting with William Brooks took place in a small private room arranged by Teresa at a downtown office building, neutral ground belonging to neither party. Teresa stood in the corridor. Renee was back at the hotel with Caden. Monica walked in alone. Brooks was already there. He was sitting at one end of a small table, and he was not the man from the plane. That man had been armored. The blazer, the posture, the certainty of someone who moved through the world with the assumption of his own authority. This man was wearing a plain dark shirt. He had not shaved. His eyes had the particular hollowness of someone who has not slept in 2 days and who has spent those 2 days looking at themselves in a way they had been successfully avoiding for a very long time. He stood when Monica came in. She had not expected that. She sat down across from him and did not speak. She had decided on the drive over that she would not go first. He had asked for this meeting. He could open it. He sat back down. He looked at his hands on the table for a moment. Then he looked up. "I don't have a speech," he said. His voice was rougher than it had been on the plane. I tried to write one, and everything I wrote sounded like an excuse or a performance, and neither of those is what I came here to do. Monica said nothing. I hit your son, Brooks said. I know what I did. I know exactly what I did, and I know why I did it. And the why is the part I have to live with. He stopped, looked at his hands again. I was raised with something in me, something I was taught without being taught, if that makes sense. A way of seeing certain people, a way of reacting. I didn't think it was there anymore. I thought I'd outgrown it, or educated myself past it, or whatever the word is for convincing yourself you're not what you actually still are. He paused. I was wrong. Monica looked at him. She was looking at him the way she looked at hard things, fully, without flinching, without giving anything away. My son asked me to tell you something, she said. Her voice was level and clear. He asked me to tell you that you scared him. He said he wasn't going to say it, but he wanted you to know. Brooks closed his eyes. He kept them closed for several seconds. When he opened them, they were wet. He's 8 years old, he said. It came out like an acknowledgement of something he had perhaps been trying not to fully feel until this moment. He is, Monica said. He was reaching for his game console. He was excited to be on an airplane. He had a Stegosaurus on his backpack, and he had been looking forward to this trip for 4 months. She paused. Let that land. You broke his arm. You broke it deliberately in front of 30 people on a plane, and then you straightened your jacket and looked at your laptop. And my son, my 8-year-old son, asked me that night if it was because we're black. Brooks said nothing. There was nothing to say. I told him the truth, Monica said, because I always tell him the truth. And he said, that's wrong. Just like that. That's wrong. He's 8 years old and he has more moral clarity than you have managed in 44 years. She let the silence sit for a moment. So I need you to understand something. This is not over when the criminal case concludes. This is not over when the civil case settles. This is not over when your name stops being in the news and people move on to the next story. What you did is going to follow my son. He is going to carry the memory of that sound, the sound of his own bone breaking, for the rest of his life. He is going to remember being 8 years old on an airplane and learning that some people see him as something that can be struck. You gave him that. You put that in him. And no court ruling and no settlement and no tearful meeting in a conference room makes that not exist. The room was very quiet. Brooks said, I know. Good, Monica said. I needed you to know it from me, not from a news story, from his mother, who was sitting 2 feet away when it happened. She stood up. She picked up her bag. She looked at him one more time. Not with hatred, not with satisfaction, not with anything that required a name. Just looked at him, the way you look at something that has finally been seen clearly enough to be set down. The legal process will do what it does, she said. But I came here for Caden, because he asked me to tell you he was scared, and I made him a promise. She walked out. Teresa was in the corridor. She looked at Monica's face and read it the way skilled people read things, and said simply, okay? Okay, Monica said. 9:42. They drove back to the hotel in relative silence, and Monica was aware that something had shifted in her. Not resolved, because some things do not resolve. They only change shape. But shifted in the way that weight shifts when you have carried it to the place it needed to go and set it down with intention. Caden was in the hotel room with Renee, backpack on, ready. He had been packed since 8:30, Renee reported, with some combination of exasperation and pride. He looked up when Monica came in and searched her face with the quick, accurate attention he had always had for her moods. Did you tell him? Caden asked. I told him, Monica said. What did he say? He didn't say anything, but he heard it. Caden thought about this for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly, the nod of someone completing a transaction that needed completing. Okay, he said. Can we go home now? We can go home now. He picked up his backpack. Navy blue Stegosaurus patch perfectly aligned, exactly as he had insisted, and headed for the door. 3 weeks later, the case moved at the speed Teresa had promised it would move, which was faster than the civil system and slower than the news cycle. And Monica had learned to navigate that gap with the patience of someone who has decided that the destination matters more than the pace. William Brooks entered a plea of guilty to felony assault of a minor with a hate crime enhancement. The plea agreement, negotiated between Gerald Fitch and the DA's office, called for 2 years of incarceration, mandatory psychological counseling, 5 years of supervised release, and a formal statement of the racial motivation entered into the court record as a matter of public law. That last element had been fought over for 6 days. The DA's office had held firm. Patricia Osei had told Teresa privately that she was not going to let the hate crime designation disappear into a quiet plea deal, that the court record was a permanent document and it would say what the evidence showed. It said what the evidence showed. Monica sat in the courtroom the day Brooks entered his plea. Caden was not there. She and Teresa had decided together that a courtroom was not where he needed to be, that he had already been present for the hardest part. Renee was beside Monica. Marcus Webb was 2 rows back, still in a baseball cap, having driven 6 hours from his home because he said there were things you needed to see through to the end. Patricia Hendricks, the retired family court judge, was 3 seats down the row, her notebook in her lap out of professional habit, even though there was nothing left to record. When the judge read the sentence and the gavel came down, Monica did not cry. She sat with her hands folded and her back straight, and she felt the formal, public, legal weight of the record being made. Not satisfaction exactly, something closer to completion, the recognition of a debt being acknowledged, even if it could never be fully paid. After the hearing, in the corridor, Marcus Webb came over and shook her hand. He said, "How's he doing? Caden?" Monica smiled, the genuine kind. His cast came off 2 weeks ago. He immediately asked if he could go back to Little League. He's been reading about paleontology nonstop. He wants to go to the Field Museum in Chicago. Marcus laughed. "That's a good kid." "That's an extraordinary kid," Monica said. "He always was. That man on the plane didn't change that. He couldn't." Patricia Hendricks stopped on her way out and gave Monica a brief, firm handshake and said, "The record is clean. It will stand." Monica said, "Thank you," and meant it in the full dimension of the word, which was large. 6 weeks after the hearing, the airline completed its mandatory policy overhaul, 43 pages of revised incident response protocols for in-flight assaults, with specific provisions for racially motivated confrontations, mandatory reporting chains, and real-time authority given to senior cabin crew to restrain and isolate threatening passengers. It was the most substantive change to in-flight safety policy the airline had made in 11 years. 3 other major domestic carriers adopted similar frameworks within 60 days, citing the Williams case in their internal policy memos. Teresa sent Monica a copy of each one. The civil case settled 4 months after the criminal plea, on terms that Monica and Teresa had negotiated from a position of such complete legal and public advantage that Gerald Fitch had stopped sending counteroffers after the 3rd one and simply agreed. The amount was not disclosed. Monica had insisted on one confidentiality clause and one only, the dollar figure, because Caden was a child and would remain a child for a while yet, and she wanted him to grow up as himself rather than as the amount. But it was, Teresa told her, more than enough to fund every aspect of Caden's future that Monica had ever let herself dream about when she was working overtime and cutting grocery budgets and squirreling away money for a first-class seat. The morning the settlement was finalized, Monica went into Caden's room while he was getting ready for school. He was standing in front of his mirror in his school uniform, examining his healed arm. Fully healed, the doctor had confirmed. No lasting structural damage, clean and whole, with the scientific interest he brought to most things. "It looks normal again," he said, rotating it. "It is normal again," Monica said. He looked at her in the mirror. "Is everything done now? The court stuff?" "The court stuff is done," he nodded, looked at his arm one more time. Then he picked up his backpack. Same backpack, same Stegosaurus patch, no longer iron-on perfect, but worn now, slightly faded at the edges from 4 months of daily use, and he slung it over his shoulder and looked at her with an expression that was, as it had always been, clearer and more settled than any expression an 8-year-old should have been able to produce. "Mom," he said, "yeah, baby, can we actually go to LA sometime, like maybe this summer?" Monica looked at her son, her extraordinary, infuriating, unbreakable son, with his Stegosaurus patch and his dinosaur facts and his purple cast that was gone now, but that she would carry the color of for the rest of her life. She thought about the morning 4 months ago when he had woken up before his alarm, already dressed, already ready, already pointed towards something worth going toward. She thought about him pressing his forehead against the window to watch the ground fall away. She thought about him saying, "Mom, we're actually flying." She thought about the woman in the first-class lounge who had been, for 3 careful minutes, at peace. "Yeah," she said, "we're going to LA." He grinned then, that full, gap-toothed, unreserved grin that she had been given custody of for 8 years and that she intended to protect with everything she had for every year that followed. He grinned and adjusted his backpack and headed for the front door, and Monica watched him go, and she let herself feel, fully and without compression, every feeling she had been managing since October. The terror and the fury and the grief and the exhaustion and the love, above all the love, which had been there first and would be there last, and which nothing and no one on any flight at any altitude had ever come close to touching. Caden Williams went to school that morning with his healed arm and his Stegosaurus backpack and his head full of dinosaurs and his whole unmarked future stretching out ahead of him like an open sky. And Monica Williams stood in the doorway of their home and watched him walk down the street. And she was not afraid.